Hi makers, it's Anouk here from Maker's Loft with another great project from our Maker's Box range. In your pottery box you should have received a kilo of clay, some basic tools and a piece of cutting nylon and a little mat to work on. With this size clay you should be able to make a couple of pots. So let's start with cutting the clay. We're going to measure out, using our kitchen scales, about 400 grams of clay. Be sure to put the remainder of the clay in a bag so that it doesn't dry out. So in this video I'm going to teach you how to make a basic pinch pot. With this technique you'll be able to make a range of different type of pots. Little pots like that are nice for jewelry or little dipping saucers. You can make much bigger ones like this as well. These ones that I'm showing you have been fired and glazed, and this is the one that I'm going to use today. It's got my water in it. Now the great thing with making pinch pots is that you don't need a lot of tools, you don't need a large work area, and pottery doesn't have to be as messy as some people might think. So I have my lump of clay. I'm going to start with wedging the clay, and I use the palm of my hand. Work your clay into a ball. This time we're going to use the inside palm. Once you have a ball, remove all the cracks and grooves out of it. And just smooth it out a bit. So we've got a nice ball of clay here. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create more of a cylinder shape. So I'm just going to roll the sides out a little bit on my mat, and I'm just going to gently tap the top and the bottom. It doesn't have to be a perfect cylinder shape. But just something like that. So what we're going to do now is we are going to create the center of our pinch pot. So when you place your finger in the center, just check first that you're happy with the location, and then drive your finger into the pot, but make sure you finish about a centimeter from the base. So now that I have the center of my pot, I'm going to pinch the walls out. Now we do that by placing the thumb inside the pot, and when we pinch, we want to pinch the straight parts of our fingers. If we pinch like that, we'll get lots of little pointy finger marks in it, so we want to remain nice and flat. We're going to start with the very base of the pot first. So rotate your pot the whole way around and keep your fingers nice and flat so that your walls don't widen out. If you hold your hand like that, you're going to have wider walls. Once you've gone the whole way around, bring your hand slightly up and go back around again. slower you work your way around, the more even the finish will be. Bring your hand up a little bit further again and go around again. Now you can see that the walls are lengthening. So if you wanted to use this for like a little tumbler to drink out of, this would be a good shape for that. I'm just going to show you the inside so that you can see what's happened from when we first created our center. I'm going to be really careful with touching the edges. You can see there's already a little bit of cracking here, so at no point do I actually pinch the edges there. We're going to work the edges later. I'm just going to dip one finger in water and just apply a little bit of moisture to the very top of my pinch pot where I can see there's a little bit of cracking going on. Okay, I'm going to go back to the bottom again and I'm going to do another full rotation, pinching the bottom of my pot and bringing more clay to the top. Now you can see that the pot has gone all the way into the corner of my hand there. So after this, I'm not going to be able to reach down the bottom anymore. This will be my last pinch around the base. So this is a pretty rough looking pot at the moment, but I'm quite happy with the depth of it, and I'm now just going to clean it up a little bit. So at this point you need to be careful that the clay is still quite wet, so it's still very moldable, so you've got to be careful that you don't overwork it, otherwise it's just sort of going to flop open. So anywhere where there's cracks you can apply water, but the more water you add, the more unstable you're making the body of your pinch pot as well. So I'm just going to lift the sides up a little bit there, because you can see by looking at it I've got a little bit of unevenness in there, so I'm just going to push the sides up like that. And you can see, looking at it now, that's much better. So what I want to do now is I just want to clean up the edges a little bit and get rid of some of the finger marks. I'm not going to pull the clay up too hard at this point, because otherwise I'll create unevenness across the top again. So it's more just about smoothing out whichever direction you need to go in to smooth out any lumps or bumps. Take as much time as you like on this. This is the therapeutic part of working with clay, is perfecting that shape. And always make sure that you support the outside or the opposite side of where you're working. Now, I don't use a lot of tools when I'm working with clay. I prefer using my hands for just about everything. But if you like, or you're having problems with long fingernails, you can use the little wooden spoon that I've given you in your pack, and you can use it to smooth out as well. And you can see the outside is quite lumpy as well, so we still need to work on the outside. Now I'm finding that my clay is still really wet, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and find myself a hairdryer, and I'm going to dry the body of my clay a little bit. You can also, if you don't have a hairdryer, you can leave it to sit for a little while, maybe about an hour or two, and it'll be a little bit easier to handle. It won't be quite so floppy. Okay, so I've got a slightly stronger body of clay now, which will make it a little bit easier for me to work on the outside. So I'm going to make sure that I've got my hand supporting it on the inside, and this will allow me to rub out the imperfections. Some of you might like the lumps, so you can always leave them as well. So this is using the spoon, or you can just use your fingers. And if you can, start from the bottom and work your way to the top. Okay, now we just need to go back and get our edge looking nice and smooth. So the best way to do this is to hold your finger on both sides and rub it across. Now if you're going to use this to drink out of, that is a slightly thick rim, so I would suggest that you spend a little bit of time gently thinning that out a little bit. You can bring some clay up from the bottom if you feel like there's not enough to bring upwards. And again, I'm using the flat parts to work my clay with. You're getting little cracks, just add a tiny little bit of water, but just don't make your body too wet now, because you'll lose the strength of the walls. So the organicness of your pinch pot is completely up to you, whether you like to leave it quite rough and lumpy and bumpy, or you want to spend hours on perfecting it, which is always very tempting. I'm going to keep working on mine for a little bit longer, but I think this is starting to look like a great little coffee mug. So maybe you can have a look at, if you are going to do a coffee mug, have a look at some of the glasses or a mug that you have at home to see what's a comfortable thickness to drink out of. But I think that's about it. So I'm going to just give it another dry now, and I've still got a few more lumps and bumps to work out of there. I've actually created a few more new ones there that I'm going to smooth out a little bit, but my clay body is just getting a little bit floppy, so I'm just going to dry it again and then remove some of the lumps of fingerprints that I've managed to create in there. Okay, I'm going to start with going on the inside now, because I'm kind of okay with the unevenness on the outside. So I'm just going to really gently, while supporting the pot in the palm of my hand, I'm going to really gently smooth out the inside of my pot. Now it's not mushy in there, but the clay can still move around a little bit. If it's too dry and the clay's not moving around at all, you can just do a really gentle little finger dip in the water to use a little bit of water in there. It just helps move the surface clay around a little bit. Now this obviously really depends on the size pot that you're making. So this is 400 grams of clay. So you can see just how big the cup is with 400 grams of clay. So a little pot like that you could probably make out of about 100 to 150. This one's probably about 350. The walls are much thicker on this one because it's more for dips, or you can even use it to put little succulents in. But if you're going to drink out of it, you want the walls to be nice and thin, at least at the top. They don't have to be really, really thin at the base because sometimes it can be a little bit hot to hold. And then you're going to draw in the foot. If you feel like the base of your pot is very thin and it's collapsing, just make sure you don't remove too much. So once you feel like you've got an even circle, dip your finger in the water and start smoothing out the base. Again, just watch out that you don't push down too hard on that base, just in case it's a little bit thin. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's meant to look like a hand-built pinch pot, so I won't spend too much time on perfecting it. And that's what the base looks like. So I've got a nice base in there, nice straight sides, and go around and sort of straighten that out a little bit. Looking at it from the top, and then you can sit it to dry. This will probably take about 2 days to dry, but it depends on the temperature and whether it's raining. Once it's dry, you can paint it. So I'm going to give you a demonstration on doing the ceramic painting when I've let this pot dry. So welcome back to our Pottery Pinch Pot class. Your pinch pot should have had a chance to dry overnight. If you did want to do it all in one go, you can do that by slowly drying it with the hairdryer. Just make sure that it doesn't leave any marks behind when you touch it. So what I've packed for you in your maker's box is a range of things to do for the ceramic painting. So I've pre-selected some colours for you. They're all from the Chrysanthos colour range. They're underglazes, And so they go in on greenware, which is the clay before it's been fired, and then they get fired once with the underglazes on there, and then we put them in a glaze and then get fired again. So you will need to find either a local firing service, or if you're local to us, you can contact us and we can fire it for you. It's always a good idea to give us a little bit of notice, because we have like a rotation of firing that we do here throughout the week, and it may need to wait until the next rotation. So what we've got in your pack is a couple of brushes, some colours, a little paint palette and a paper towel. The colour I've chosen today is Art Grey Underglaze. I've chosen it for some salad service that I made a little while ago. It's a really nice sort of soft greeny blue colour, which looks really nice with the natural white of the clay. Depending on the size pot you have, you might only need a tiny little bit. If you've made a small pot, which I recommend for beginners, you won't need quite so much. Now, when you're painting your ceramics, it's always best to start on the inside, because it gives you something to hold on the outside. If you have a lazy Susan or something like that, it's sometimes helpful to have something that you can rotate it on. So I'm going to start with the bottom, and I'm going to slowly work my way to the top with the first coat. Now, it's really important that you give it a few coats of paint. The first coat tends to leave a fair few streaks behind. The second coat will minimize that a little bit, and then the third coat will definitely give you plenty of coverage. If you've still got a little bit of paint left, you might as well give it a fourth coat. And it's best to use this large flat brush for the larger surfaces, and the smaller art brush you can use for small detail. So I've done one coat all on the inside. I'm going to go back to the bottom where it's already dry, because it dries really, really quickly. And it's going to go quite a sort of chalky, light coloured finish. That is not a good indicator of what it's going to look like once it's been fired. So just to give you a little bit of an example of this colour on our colour chart. So the colours become much brighter and vibrant. So I'm now going to apply the second coat. You'll find the second coat doesn't absorb quite as quickly as the first coat does. Clean up the edges of my pot a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of water on and just wipe the paint that's gone over the edge off the edge. Get your little pointy tool that we sent you in your box, and we're going to use that to sgraffito our name into the bottom. So essentially what you're doing is you're scratching into the paint, going back to the previous layer, so that'll become white when it's been fired. It'll be engraved into your paint. You can also scratch something into the base, or you can use your finer brush to do a design on there. You're very good at your brush lettering. So we've now got a pot that's ready to be bisque fired. The bisque fire we do is 1060 degrees. And then once it's been bisque fired, it'll get glazed, which is when you get this nice sort of shiny finish. Once your work has been glazed, it becomes food safe and you'll be able to use it in your kitchen and put it in the dishwasher. Thank you for coming and hanging out with us today. Hope you've enjoyed learning how to do a pinch pot. Keep an eye out on our site for more pottery workshops.